Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqanda.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Joining us on the virtual stage for the 24 Hours of Tapping is Steve Wells. Steve Wells is an internationally recognized psychologist, leadership coach, and peak performance consultant from Perth, Western Australia. He's also my buddy when it comes to talking about Aussie rules, football, and cricket. He regularly consults and presents his unique personal development and professional training programs worldwide. Steve has worked with elite performance in sports and business with numerous success stories. Steve has been researching and teaching energy techniques for over 28 years and conducted the first public research study on EFT for treating specific phobias. Please welcome to our virtual stage, my good buddy and yours, Steve Wells. So, one of the things that we have been doing through the course of the entire 24 hours here as we've been having these conversations is I've been asking people just in their own words to define some terms so that as we're having the conversation, not that you and I have to agree on those definitions, but we can kind of see where everybody's coming from on this. So, in your experience, in your mind, because I know you've been thinking about this for decades, when you say peak performance, what does peak performance mean to you, or what are you trying to achieve when you're moving towards peak performance?
Okay, so ultimately, I think peak performance is a commitment to excellence and to going as far as you can go and doing as well as you can do in an area. When we talk about peak performance, we're usually thinking about the Olympic athlete or the top person in business or whatever. And so, of course, that's the idea of the peak. But your peak may be different to my peak. And I settled on a version of peak performance, which is basically being able to live the life you want to live, achieving what you want to achieve in the way that you want to achieve it. And that's because probably most of us kind of settle for something less than that. You know, we stop ourselves short, and most people know that they're stopping themselves short, that they feel that they could do more. You know, every one of us has had a report card that could do better. You know,
Right.
And we tend to give ourselves that all the time. Well, actually, there's something to be said for releasing your emotional attachments to the report card, and then you can find out whether you really want to achieve in that area or not. Because, you know, I think with peak performance as well, it's about values and about what you really want. And if you don't really want it, why would you go to the top in it?
And I think one of the things I think is so valuable in what you're saying there is that in your definition, you're giving us permission to decide on the outcome that we want. Because so often we're enculturated in a way where this is the definition of success. And that could be inside of our ethnic group, that could be inside of our culture, it could be inside of our family. And oftentimes the reason why we are holding ourselves back towards a particular goal is it isn't even the right fit for me, much less going in that particular direction. And I love the fact that your definition starts with what is the peak for me? What is right for me? What is authentic for me? And I think that's just such a beautiful place to start the conversation.
Well, and that might mean that you need to release your emotional attachments to doing what everybody else wants or what everybody else thinks. Because or your comparison, you know, if you compare yourself to someone who's way up here all the time, then you go, oh, well, what's the point? I'm never going to get there. But actually, if you're looking at incremental improvement, you can be surprised where you can get in your own lifetime, you know? So
One of the phrases I've been playing around a lot with in my own tapping and with my clients, when we're like, we name a goal that we're holding ourselves back from, and it's just complete the sentence for me. I am not allowed to have insert goal because.
oh yeah,
And in
yeah,
doing that, a lot of what we're bumping into there is these cultural conditionings that say this is what success is. And
yes,
like you said, being able to give ourselves permission to let go of that belief, let go of our emotional attachment to that belief, and letting go of our emotional attachment to the way people who have created that standard are going to respond to us. You
oh yeah.
know,
I say sacrifice everything on the altar of releasing, even your cherished ideas about what you think you want. Because when you release your emotional attachments, you're not going to lose anything good. You're only going to lose something that causes you to suffer. So if you're always feeling bad because you're comparing yourself to someone over here, or you're thinking that you need to achieve this, but really, once you release your emotional attachments, you realize, no, I was doing that for someone else. I was doing that. That's
right.
someone else's goal. That's someone else's values. That's what the world says is important. You know, where I am in my life now, a lot of the things that I thought were important years ago, they're not important to me anymore. And a
Right.
lot of the things that the world says are really important, they don't,
Yeah.
they don't float my boat at all. Yeah.
So then if I'm in a circumstance where I want to be moving forward and I'm not achieving what I'd like, I think one of the first reasonable questions is the goal that I have in front of me the right goal for me? Does it fit for me? If you are working with someone in that circumstance where they're asking that question, okay, I have this goal, maybe it's mine, maybe it's given to me. What's the first step that you'd be doing working with someone in
I'm
that
probably
circumstance
going
to
to
help them
ask
get
what's
clarity?
most
Yeah.
important to you. I'm going to ask about values. I'm going
Mm,
to I'm going to get, because it's not about the goal, it's about the value. It's never about the goal, it's about what's going to give you. You know, I remember when I was working with the state touch rugby team in my local state, and I was asking these guys about the goals, and one guy says, "Oh, an 1100cc motorbike." I said, "Well, if you get that motorbike, what's that going to give you?" He says, "Power." So what he really wants is to feel like a powerful person. He wants a powerful motorbike because he wants to see himself as a powerful person. That, you would say, is his value. And
mhm.
good on him. He's allowed to have that if he wants that
Yeah.
and so on. But it'd be good if he realized that he doesn't need the motorbike to be a powerful person, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think is so valuable about that question. Like, why do you want that thing? Is because
Mm,
the moment we like start to give that underlying value to what's there, all of a sudden it opens our conscious and our subconscious mind to go, oh, this isn't the only path to that particular thing. I,
yeah.
on some level, consciously or subconsciously want power. And so I go, ooh, motorbike gives me power. That works. And so we then start to assume that's the path. But if we keep re-reminding ourselves what it gives us, because, like, yeah, so for example,
Oh,
this particular event that we are doing right here, this is not the fundraiser and the impact thing I wanted to do. I actually had a different plan 3 years ago in responding to the refugees crisis and all of that sort of stuff. And one, it was outside of my grasp, but two, when I got clarity about why I was doing the specific thing, something else evolved that created something new and different. And so, like, this as awesome as this 24 hours is, and as awesome as this third year is, this was never the plan. This is a
yeah.
consequence of having a clear underlying value system that I was
That's
trying to
right.
solve a
That's
problem
right.
for.
Because the conscious mind thinks this is the way I'm going to do it,
Yeah.
and I call it the super positive fantasy. We get attached to the super positive fantasy
Yeah.
of how it has to be. And then right in front of us is the stuff that could take us exactly where we want to go. We don't see that because it's like, no, we need the super positive fantasy thing. So I work with a lot of people on releasing their emotional attachments to what I call the super positive fantasy. First of all, the super positive fantasy says it's going to be so wonderful, it's going to be
Right.
so perfect. But the super positive fantasy also says it's got to be so perfect. I have to be so perfect
Right.
before I can do anything. I can't take any steps. And the perfect positive, super positive fantasy says all these peak performers, oh, they're always motivated. They're always, getting out of bed at 5 a.m. and, doing their thing. man, they go through, you work with a few of them, they go through the same stuff as the rest of us, and they have to get over their resistance on a regular basis. And they do.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's inside of that when we're talking about this perfect, super positive fantasy is to recognize the fact that fulfillment and an authentic life is not an all or nothing proposition. And I can be in a circumstance where I am achieving and living through those values that I want, and also going, ooh, and it could be richer like this, and it could be deeper like this, and it could be collaborative like this. And it's not like I work, and now it's not a switch. Like it's not a light switch. It's a plant that we're growing into, that we're nurturing, that is changing over time. And I think that immediately takes some of that idea of that perfectionism, because like the fastest way for me not to take action is to decide that I have to do something perfectly. Because I have 5 decades of history that clearly tells me it's never going to happen in a way that is perfect.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's 2 real main pathways to peak performance. There are people who have the compelling vision that are, you know, they're like, yes, I want to do this. It's 100% yes. You know, that concept that I have of 100% yes. It's like, yes, I really want this. And of course, unless you really, really wanted it, you wouldn't really go for it. But the other pathway that to peak performance is following the energy on a day-by-day basis, being open to what's presented to you and following the energy. So I've seen some incredible peak performers, and they never actually ever had this big vision. They actually just, they like what they do. They love to do a deal, or they love to, you know, play their sport, and they just follow the energy and they're doing what they love. And lo and behold, doing it over and over and over and over, and dealing with setbacks, and, you know, overcoming those and learning how to deal with that, and learning how to do it at another level, and so on. Just progressively, they end up becoming peak performers. So most people are in love with the first version, but there's something to be said for the other version as well.
And I actually think most people fall into that second version of it. But the people who have the clear vision are the ones that are able to tell a very clear story about what they're trying to do. And so they're the ones, like, those are the stories that are talking about success. They're here in the States. There used to be a music television station that was adult contemporary, like MTV. And they used to have this series called Behind the Music. And behind the music, it would show the arc of a band, and it would be struggling in obscurity and big break and super fame and fame destroying them and rock bottom and recovering. And over the course of 44 minutes, because it was our television show plus commercials, it hit the exact same beats over and over again, because it was a really simple story to tell. And I think the folks who are clear visioned, and I'm one of those people, like I just, the way my brain is built, it's nothing I cultivated. Like I have more plans before my first cup of coffee than most people have in a week. But I'm atypical in that way. But because I have a really clear story, it's easier for me to say, this is the goal, and these are the steps that I took, and these are the setbacks. And so everybody hearing that goes, oh, in order to be successful, I have to follow that particular formula, where the following the energy and growing into this thing, I think that's a larger percent of this population, but we don't have a compelling narrative around that particular thing. So we don't see that modeled in peak performance.
Yes. Well, it's the concept of basically being open to what life presents you, and taking it when it's presented to you and going forward. And that's what you've done with this, Gene. That's why here we are. You know, you said yes to this because it fit with your values. It maybe didn't meet the vision that you had, which had you over here. And because you were in touch with what's really important in terms of values and heart, this is why it's happening.
So how then do, like, you know, and again, you and I have spent decades thinking about this. So, you know, if I ask you, what are your values? If you ask me, what are my values? We could both give clear statements, maybe not a perfect list, but like 4 or 5 of them very, very sharp that like resonate deeply.
Yeah.
What about someone who like hasn't been giving that thought yet? Like they have been following the flow, and they're at a point where like, okay, I'm dissatisfied with this. I hear this thing about values. Shrug emoji. I don't know. Like,
Well, actually, so usually I when I work with peak performers, the starting point is exactly that, dissatisfaction, right? So you
mm-hmm,
start with the dissatisfaction and you do some tapping on that. Usually if it's a peak performer, let's say it's an athlete or someone like that, they have a part of their game where they're frustrated or they're not getting the results that they want or it's just not working and so on. And I think moments of dissatisfaction are really great because, you know, this is when you're tuned into your subconscious BS, you know, your
mm-hmm.
belief systems, your challenges, and so on. Same thing happens when you set a goal. Up comes your subconscious stuff into consciousness, and so you can identify that and you can apply tapping to it. So I would say, number one, do some tapping on the dissatisfaction, and then start asking yourself, number one, what do I want? But number two, and maybe this is a more important question, that's relates to what you're asking. What's most important to me in my life? That's the values question. Okay.
Yeah.
What is most important to me? And then and underneath anything that you think that you want, what will that give me? Because what you think it will give you is really what you're after. And ultimately, I get people to keep digging until they come up with the emotional states that they really want. Things like freedom or achievement or security or love or joy or peace or whatever it is. And those are the things that will actually drive us. These are I call values are really emotional drivers that are underneath everything that we want. And I say it isn't in that thing. It's actually, it's in you. And if you can uncover that in yourself, then you have great drive to be able to go wherever you want to go, because you're driven by the right kind of emotions.
And so there's two things I want to underline what you just said there that I think are super valuable. Number one, starting with the dissatisfaction. I love Milton Erickson's idea of all transformation starts by stating what is. And just stating, I'm dissatisfied. These are the negative emotions, because the negative emotions are just information. Frustration, I don't have something I want. Sadness, disconnected from something that's important. Like it's just giving us information. The second thing that I love, as you were talking about that process of iterating and going deeper and iterating and going deeper, because values are so important, oftentimes I think we just need to know them. And what you just described there is it's not a process of knowing them. It's a process of unearthing them and discovering them. Because if I have spent decades of my life with this enculturation of what success and happiness and whatever that is, like that's just piled on top of it. And so like giving ourselves permission to sift through, like I'm dissatisfied. Huh, this is kind of interesting. Huh, this is really interesting. Huh, this really resonates. And giving folks permission not to like, oh yeah, these are my values. Like it's okay if that unfolds over time.
It's not intellectual, and you might have become attached to false values. You might have become attached to other people's values. And so again, values at their core are just beliefs. The belief is that this kind of way of being in the world is most important. Now, if you've come from an unsafe world, then you're seeking safety. Okay.
Yeah.
But of course, you might be carrying some of the unsafety from before. Or if you've come from being locked in, you're like, freedom. I want freedom. But ultimately, the real freedom is the freedom you find inside. So releasing all your attachments to all that stuff that you came from, so that you're no longer carrying it with you, you might find that freedom is easier than you think. That you don't need the multi-millions in order to be free, or you don't need the to be the intergalactic megastar in order to be free.
I took a world religions class when I was in college, and we were talking about this Buddhist sense of enlightenment, and our professor shared this really lovely idea of how you release, and then you get insight, and the moment you get insight, you emotionally attach to the insight, and so then it has to go through this process again of release, insight, and then we get emotionally attached to it. And so like the emotional attachment to a value, sometimes the value is given to me and I think that's the value I'm supposed to have. Other times, like the example of safety or freedom, like maybe for the first decade that I am in control of this particular thing, freedom or safety is the thing that's most important. Then I might be at another point in my life where safety is now no longer the primary driver, because I have escaped the unsafe place. I've healed the unsafe place. I recognize I'm safe in the world, and that's now a given, and it's not something I have to be striving for, which gives us the opportunity to go, okay, what's the next thing? And not only is it a discovery process, it's also an evolving process over the course of our life, over the course of seasons, over the course of time, in who we are in the place that we're standing.
I've always said the minute my first son was born, my values changed in an instant.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
What was important yesterday is no longer important today, you know?
Right. Yeah. And even in a circumstance where conceptually you knew what was coming, you didn't know what was coming until all of a sudden this little creature was actually there in your arms. And it's like, oh, this is now a different world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what I thought was important, and I couldn't care less about right now. This is, yeah, exactly. Going back to what you said before, you said about that quote from Milton Erickson. I love that. And I love Milton Erickson. I say to people, you can go anywhere you want as long as you're willing to start from where you are. So the challenge also is that we don't want to start from where we are. We want to start from where we should be, you know? So a lot of my work with people is getting them over their dissatisfaction with where they are and their, you know, I should be there. Well, the more you're attached to should be there, the more you're not willing to start from where you are. But if you can get to where you are, then you can go anywhere. You can do anything.
And I think there's a natural resistance to tuning into where I am, because there's a part of us that's afraid that if I come to terms with where I am, I'm then going to become satisfied by where I am, and I'm not going to move forward.
Oh, yeah. And that's
and
some of the biggest fears. That's
it's totally not true. Like when I get clarity, it's like, oh yeah, I really understand where I am. We definitely need to get out of here. But like you said, now that I know where I'm standing, I know where the next foothold is. I know where the next step is. I know where I'm going because I know where I'm standing.
The belief is, unless I'm unhappy with where I am, then I won't have motivation to go there. Which means that in order to be a peak performer, you've always got to be dissatisfied. And that's not a wonderful way to live, you know. So can you accept where you are and go for more? That's what it really is. And that's a paradox. The mind can't conceive of that because the mind's like, no, I need to be dissatisfied in order to go. No, you can actually be really happy with where you are and be motivated to have even more or to create even better. Someone said you don't have to be sick to get better, you know. So we have that inside us because we're kind of goal-seeking organisms. We're part of the life force of the planet, and life actually begets life. We want to spread life. We want to spread love. We want to spread energy. We want to test the boundaries. We want to climb that hill. You know, whatever it is, and it won't be very long, by the way, if you are sitting there and doing nothing for a while before you'll create some challenge for yourself just to get interested, you know. So,
and because like part of feeling safe is knowing where we stand and having a problem to solve. Like it gives conscious context and direction. So we've talked about.
Let me pick up on that point, and then we'll do some tapping maybe. That's the other aspect about peak performance. I like to say is that peak performers have to deal with problem after problem after problem after problem after problem. And the reason why most people don't continue as far as they could possibly go in an area is that most people, when they fail the first time, they get up and hope nobody saw them and, you know, skulk away. Most people who become tapping practitioners, for example, they go, okay, now I'm going to have a practice, and they put their thing out there and they hear the sound of crickets. And so they're like, oh, okay, you know, I'm not good enough. I'm, you know, that generally we get down on ourselves about it. And then if there's no energy in the thing, if it's not something you really value, then you might have trouble getting up after that. Or if you don't apply a technique like tapping to deal with that failure, that plateau, that reversal, that crisis. I know that you have gone through this a lot because you're one of the people who's honest about the challenges that you have, and I love to read that stuff. And so I know that you and I we've been doing this for a long time, but we've also been through a fair few reversals and stuff like that. I've had times in my life where I've said to my wife, okay, if the business doesn't succeed in the next few months, I'll go get a job. And man, there was sometimes it was looking real bleak. So the challenge is actually to deal with ongoing challenges. It's not always onward and upward, every movement, a picture of grace. It's like, you take one step forward, 2 steps back, you take another step forward, 2 steps back. And you're like, now I'm 4 steps back, like this is crazy. This is not the way it's meant to go. Well, actually, that's the way it goes for most peak performers. They have all those challenges, but they get up and keep going because it's valuable, because it serves a higher value that's bigger than just themselves. And so they, they have the compelling vision, or the thing that they really want is significant in terms of their values. So that's why I think values are so important.
Yeah. And so for me, like, free will is really, really good at getting me out of traffic when I'm about to be hit, or is really good in getting me out of traffic when I'm about to be hit by a car. It's really bad in getting me to persistently to do something that is hard. And so I actually have, in my fridge, I have something that I call a Y jar. So I have this 64-ounce jug of water, and every single time I refill my glass over the course of the day, I say one of my whys out loud. I'm sitting down at my desk here because I want to create tools and help people so that they consistently take action to create lives that are authentic and they love. And so not all my whys are purely altruistic. I have financial whys and relationship whys and whatever, but by constantly touching base with them when I'm in the middle of one of those times where things are not going as planned and people are not responding the way that I want, and it feels like I'm screaming into a void, no one is responding back, I have this flame of energy that is going, okay, this is why I want that thing. And if that thing is so valuable, that thing that is so valuable is more important and more compelling than the pushback I'm receiving from the failure that's just in front of me. And like you said, sometimes it's just enough for me to think that, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, okay, the failure feels bigger. We need to be doing a little work so I can balance that scale again, so I'm moving forward in that way.
Because peak performance ultimately is about persistence.
Yep.
I couldn't tell you how many people I've worked with who said, a lot of people who are a lot better than me gave up, and I just kept going. They were so much better than me. They had more talent than me. They had more, education than me. But they just gave up, and I just kept on going, even though I, had frustration after frustration after frustration after frustration. Nothing will get you to do that unless you have a compelling vision based on really important values, or you just have this inner drive that's coming from your values that says, I just want to have another go. I just want to keep going. Let's just see what happens, and then you keep going in an area for long enough, lo and behold, you're a peak performer. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's do some tapping. Let's clear some stuff. Let's make it easier for folks to do that.
So as you know, I use intention tapping, and intention tapping consists of a simple version of tapping we call SET, Simple Energy Techniques, and that's just basically tapping without setup statements. And we use a continual tapping process, and then just follow whatever comes next. We find we don't need to use setup statements because the setup statement is supposedly to deal with the blocking beliefs or whatever. Well, if you make the blocking belief the next thing that you focus on, then you can just keep tapping and apply it to that. It works just as well. So that's the tapping part. And then the intentions are some very special intentions I discovered during a difficult time I was going through of my own. And I realized that tapping releases emotional attachment, so that things that upset you, you can think a thought that upsets you when you do tapping, no longer upset by it. It releases the emotional attachment. And I just had the insight, can we use intention to do that? And so I discovered, lo and behold, if I form the simple intention, I release all my emotional attachments to whatever it is that's bugging me, things start to move. And then the body component, we have energy and we have disruptions in energy, and tapping restores the energy to flow. Turns out you can use intention to do that as well. So we use specific types of intentions in intention tapping that release emotional attachments, restore the body's energy to flow and balance. And also there's some other special ones that we use for releasing resistance to performance, or to moving forward, or to having joy, or whatever it is that we're resisting. So got something you want to achieve, got something that you want to get over, got something that maybe you're resisting that you'd like to release the resistance, let's go for it.
Yeah. So membership program I have reached a plateau of the number of people who are in it, and I'd love to be serving more people inside of that.
Okay. So what's the problem?
Not reaching out the way that I know that I should and I can be, to invite people to join.
All right, beautiful. You just used the word that is the biggest barrier for most people in terms of performance and achievement is should, right?
Yep.
And also the one where we end up suffering the most. So we're going to use continual tapping. You can tap on any points in any order that you like. I'm going to be tapping at the same time. I'll also tap using the thumb. Let's see if I can show people the thumb of the same hand on the finger points, because that's just an easy, non-fatiguing way of doing tapping. And we teach this to clients, and they use it discreetly in public, and it's a way of doing tapping that's easy, non-fatiguing. You can also wrap around and tap on the side of the thumb point. And so we tap on all these points, including on the side of the index finger, even though technically that's not officially a point in traditional Chinese medicine. So just say, I release all my emotional attachments,
all of my emotional attachments
to what I should be doing. And then just let it do whatever it does, and just notice whatever comes next.
Literally at the end of that statement, there was just like this somersault of energy, right? Not a release, but it just kind of went and just kind of turned over and did something, just moved.
Because when you give that direction to the unconscious mind, it starts to move the energy. It's like it opens up that program and things start to move, and then it just delivers the next aspect. So the next aspect might be a body feeling, it might be a related issue, it might be a thought, it might be a memory. Just notice what's next.
Yeah. So what's next is I feel a constriction in my throat.
Okay. So this is very common, that once you release an emotional attachment, the energy starts to flow. You become aware of where the constriction is. Just say, I restore the right energy flow to my throat. And then don't try and make it do anything. Just let it do whatever it does, and just notice. Keep tapping. Just notice what happens next. Could be a thought, could be a feeling, could be a movement of the feeling, could be an increase, could be a decrease. Just let it do whatever it does.
Yeah. So what it initially did, just as we were tuning into it, is the attention brought more constriction to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it constricted and it held. And then at a certain point, not immediately after the phrase, it started kind of going burr, 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 and just getting gentler, and almost like it was a heartbeat or a pulse of some sort. And with each pulse, it was just releasing a little more and just releasing a little more.
That's right. So what happens is sometimes it takes a while for things to process. You just keep tapping and you just wait. And this is what we teach our practitioners. The biggest challenge for the practitioner is to wait. And the biggest challenge for the person learning this is to wait and let it do whatever it does, and notice what comes next. Because initially there might be an increase, and then it's like you're getting your energy back to flow. And when it starts to move, sometimes it comes up first and then it moves through. So
and one of the things that's made it easier for me to wait is I now do 7 minutes of wordless tapping every morning.
Yeah. Okay, so coming back to your issue, what's happening What are you noticing? And you can just notice what's there now, or you can go back to the issue and just look at that.
Yeah. So looking at the issue, there is less judgment of myself about my current state.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's not a lack of judgment, and it's not a lack of concern, but it's not a you should have been. It's like,
Yeah.
we
So I
had
say the
opportunities that
judgment
you
puts a
kind
lid
of
on the
missed.
problem. The judgment puts a lid on the problem. We take off the lid, and then we can access the problem itself.
Yeah.
So you said it's kind of like you've reached a limit, or there's a. Okay, so let's go with that. Just say I release all my emotional attachments.
I release all of my emotional attachments
to this limit.
To this limit. So there was this limit is a limit that keeps you safe.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it's not something I intellectually agree with, but emotionally it's just like,
no.
limits.
No,
there's a safety valve.
We follow emotion and energy. We don't follow logic. So just say,
I release
all my emotional attachments.
All of my emotional attachments.
I need this limit to keep me safe.
That I need this limit to keep me safe. All of a sudden, air started moving through my throat so much. And I didn't feel like a change in the constriction, but it was almost just like of just opening up and air flowing.
Something there, is that right? Some constriction? Is it still
it's
some
much less? Like I hadn't noticed the constriction was there. It was just like this next level of release that I didn't know was even possible.
Yeah, so we got a little bit of air through. Now let's see if we can get you to actually breathe, breathe fully. Or think about this thing and be able to breathe when you're doing it. That's the thing, because when we have an area of constriction, we contract ourselves, we contract our breathing, and we don't breathe easily when we think about it or when we think about what we need to do. So just say, I restore.
I restore.
The right energy flow.
The right energy flow.
To my throat.
To my throat.
And my breath.
And my breath.
And again, just let it do whatever it does. Just notice.
So the first thing I notice is that belief now sounds like someone saying something that I just know isn't true, but I'm not going to argue with them. Like if someone tells me the earth is flat, I'm like, fine, believe the earth is flat. And like, I'm not going to engage and I'm not that. And so you have to have this limit to keep me safe. Like I can hear someone saying that, but I'm like, yeah, fine, believe that. That has nothing to do with anything. It just exists, but it's not mine.
Okay. So when you think about the limit, or you think about what you want instead of the limit, what do you notice?
I noticed as that open constriction, like that constriction is opened, there's this sense of there's an easy way to tell the story and share about this that doesn't have an emotional attachment to the way the person on the other side of that story is hearing it. And so it's more a feeling of not a pushing of, but a witnessing to. And witnessing to something makes it so much easier and more honest and authentic to share. And so it doesn't feel unsafe to say it.
Okay, so let's go with that. Now I always say let's test everything. So just say I release all my emotional attachments.
I release all my emotional attachments.
To all the challenges with sharing about this.
To all the challenges we're sharing about this.
Now, this seems very global to a lot of EFT tappers, but actually, sometimes we're attached to global concepts. Sometimes it's not one thing, sometimes it's everything. So you say, I release all my emotional attachments to everything, and some people just go, because that's what they are attached to. It's it's not just one damn thing; it's everything. So
it's one of the one of the phrases I got from Stephen Daniels along that line is, I release everything known, unknown, and hidden. And it does that
Mm,
global thing. And when we did that global thing, like
mm,
my entire system just relaxed and opened up.
mm.
And there is a sense of, just kind of being on the balls of my feet the way a limber tennis player is on the balls of their feet ready to do the next thing. Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
no apprehension. There's I know it's coming at me, but I'm leaning in and I'm ready to, like, that's just the energy that goes along with taking the action around this. Is it's just like, oh yeah, great, we're gonna go do those things.
And let me just test something with you. Just say I release
I release
all my emotional attachments
all my emotional attachments
to the perfect way of doing this.
to the perfect way of doing this. And the emotional sensation was, yeah, duh.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, that's the truth, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's
This
happening in
feels
your body at the moment?
I did, like, again, there's like, just a little edge of eustress, that Christmas Eve for me
Mm,
when I'm about to get on stage and give a presentation. Like it's like,
mm.
yeah, it's like it's not distress, it's kind of a yummy sort of engaging energy that's not spasmatic, that's not gonna run everybody over, but it's just feeling like I can move forward with flow and take action in a way that feels natural, and we're going to go where we're going to go. Like there's just
Yeah,
so much lightness and freedom, and like even just like almost feeling ragdollish. It's like there's that much
yeah,
freedom to
yeah.
what's going on physically as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And let me just give you another one in case there's some other stuff. Just say I release
I release
all my resistances
all of my resistances
and aversions
and aversions
to growing this.
to growing this. That just felt like fertilizer on the garden. Like literally, like as we did that, it wasn't a releasing, it was a pouring in, it was a nourishing, it was a strengthening, it was
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
because it's not just about letting go of the things that are in the way, it's like adding those things that make it easier for us to take action. And we had gotten from the negative end of the Sue scale into the positive end of the Sue scale, where it's just feeding it now, and
yeah,
it's making, it's
yeah.
growing, it's more energizing, it's more flowy, it's more nimble.
So a lot of people, when I use that statement, if there is a lot of resistance, but they're not sure where the
Yeah,
resistance is, often that will unearth what the source of the resistance is.
yeah,
You're feeling free of the resistance on at least whatever aspects we're looking at right now.
absolutely, yeah, whatever we
So,
bumped into, yeah, absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I,
So,
I, well, I know I'm not cleaned out, but I'm cleaned out enough that a bunch of action is going to come very easily from this.
well, it's good, and I like that smile. So that's a good sign,
Yeah.
And I love your openness and honesty. So it's always a joy to work with you. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
Steve, just thank you so much for your time, your attention, your insight. We've been talking. You and I have been in different forms talking about this insight tapping for a number of years, and it's just, it's so simple, it's so elegant, it's so powerful, and like one of the real lessons I learned from working with the Peaceful Heart Network and their wordless version of TTT is trying to make it as simple as possible. And
mm,
so often, like, we want to give people the best, the most sophisticated things, and we overwhelm them. And
yes.
sharing this with someone else, because it's just a couple of things that are so simple. Not only is
Yes.
it powerful, it's powerful because they're actually going to use it. And so
Well,
I
and
love
and
that particular piece of it.
and people always want to make it more complicated.
Of course.
To this day, even though we've discovered a number of these intentions that are very powerful, to this day, 90% of the time, 90% of
That's right.
people that I work with, I'm using releasing emotional attachments and
Yep.
restoring energy flow. And that's
Yeah.
what I'm doing. I'm just combining that with simple tapping. It doesn't have to be complex. We're not having to do, 1,500 moves to do that. It's just find a new target that's triggering you. I release all my emotional attachments to X. Find a new disturbance in the body. I restore the right energy flow to Y. And that works so consistently for so many people. Combined with simple tapping and just being mindful, allowing it to do what it does. That's the key. And then not trying to consciously make something happen, just letting your energy move in the way it wants to move, and then it'll go back into flow naturally. And then you don't have to push yourself to do it. You don't have to constantly fight against resistance to do it. You know?
Yeah. Sometimes that's required, but long-term success is not going to come from that fight. We need to be in a flow state. Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Well, as always, Steve, thank you so much for your insight and your time.
Thank you, Gene. Always a pleasure. Cheers, mate.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.